Hello, and welcome to Guiding Gettysburg. One of the most visited places in the town of Gettysburg is the Jennie Wade House. This house is located on Baltimore Street as you start ascending the hill, and it's on the left-hand side. What is not normally known is this was not Jennie Wade's actual house. Jennie and her family lived on Breckenridge Street in town. This house belonged to Jennie's sister, Georgia, and the house itself is a duplex, a side-by-side duplex. Georgia McClellan lived in the left side with her husband, and on the right side were the McLean family. So it is a very small house to be a duplex, but that's the way it was back then. Georgia McClellan had a baby, Lewis, on July 1st, once after the battle had started, and she had a very rough pregnancy. So Jennie and her mother, Mary Ann, were taking care of Georgia and the baby. The bed was moved to the parlor because Georgia could not do steps after the birth, so everything in the house was centered in the first floor. The parlor is closest to the street, and the kitchen is behind the parlor. Now, Jennie Wade had been staying at Georgia's house for a while, and the Union Army had taken over Cemetery Hill, the 11th Corps to be exact, and Jennie had been going out to pump water for the soldiers. They had been doing a lot of baking of bread and biscuits and handing them out to the soldiers. And this was really wonderful for the men because they were starving at this point. Confederate soldiers had been making their way up Baltimore Street toward Cemetery Hill. And the McClellan house was caught right in the crossfire between the two armies. Snipers fired at the house where Jennie Wade and her sister were, and there are over 150 bullet holes to prove how much this was in the line of fire. Now, Jennie and her mother, Mary Ann Wade, and Georgia and the baby were all trapped in this house now. Keep in mind that normally Confederate soldiers would not fire on a house. They knew that the civilians were not involved in the battle, and this was just unheard of back then. But the reason why they fired on the Wade house was because they saw soldiers coming in and out, and they believed the soldiers had a headquarters in that building, which just wasn't true. This proved to be fatal for Jennie Wade. This 20-year-old young girl who helped so much with the Union Army and feeding them and caring for them was shot and killed on July 3rd at about 8:30 in the morning. She had been bent over a dough trough, kneading bread for the soldiers that day, and somehow a bullet found its way right to her chest. It actually went through two wooden doors to find Jennie and killed her instantly. It was a very sad story indeed. And I want to give you a little bit more background about Jennie. Jennie was a seamstress, and she was 20 years old. And she had two good friends. One was Jack Skelly, and one was Wesley Culp. And they played together when they were younger and remained good friends throughout their time as teenagers. Jack Skelly joined the Union Army, and Wesley Culp joined the Confederate Army. See, he was a harness maker in Shepherdstown, Virginia, and when the war broke out, he decided to go with his friends who were in the Confederate Army. So that's what he did. However, Jack and Wesley remained friends, and also friends with Jennie. It is said that Jennie and Jack were in love and they were engaged, but there is no way to prove this. All we know for sure is that Jennie carried a picture of Jack Skelly in the pocket of her apron, which she was wearing when she was fatally shot. Jack Skelly was taken prisoner in Virginia, and he was wounded also. Wesley Culp came across Jack Skelly, and they sat and talked like old friends do. Jack Skelly asked Wesley if he would take a letter to Jennie Wade. And Wesley said that he would if he ever was in Gettysburg again. You see, that time in the battle, nobody knew where they were headed for or what was going to happen. But Wesley Culp promised his old friend that he would do that favor. Little did they know that all three of them would be killed within a short time. And Jennie would never get the letter from Jack Skelly that he wrote, because he died, Wesley died in Gettysburg during the Battle of Gettysburg, and Jennie died as well. It's a very, very sad story. Now, Jennie's body had to be taken to the basement to stay cool, because this was only the third day of the battle and there were still shots being fired and many snipers about. So the Union soldiers snuck into the house and had to devise a way to get Jennie's body down into the basement. They went up to the second floor and knocked out a brick wall, which would lead into the McLean house. They would take Jennie wrapped in a quilt up the stairs, through the brick wall, down the McLean steps, and all the way into the basement. This way no snipers could understand what they were trying to do, and they would be safe. Jennie's body was laid on some doors and still wrapped in the quilt, and her mother and sister and brother and the baby were all in the basement until the battle was pretty much over and the firing had stopped. When the battle was over, the Union Army soldiers took Jennie's body to the backyard and buried it. They were very sad that they had lost their friend and this woman who was a true patriot. This would be the first time that Jennie was buried. There would be 2 other times for this hero of Gettysburg. In January, Jennie's body was disinterred from the backyard and moved to the German Reformed Cemetery on High Street. This would be the second time that Jennie was buried. The church quickly ran out of room to bury people, and they needed a much larger cemetery area, so they moved the bodies that were buried in their cemetery to the Evergreen Cemetery over on Baltimore Street. This cemetery is atop Baltimore Street and sits right on the hill where the beautiful gatehouse is located. Jennie's sister, Georgia, moved to Iowa after the battle, and she joined a women's group there and told them about Jennie's story and how she was the only civilian to die in the Battle of Gettysburg, and she died very bravely by trying to help the Union Army. The women of the Relief Association decided they wanted to make a monument to Jennie Wade, and they collected money and they paid for a beautiful monument in the Evergreen Cemetery. And then, by an act of Congress, Jennie Wade's grave flies an American flag 24/7 to this day. The only other American woman who has this honor has been Betsy Ross. There's a flag on her grave as well. Jennie Wade is the only civilian to die in the Battle of Gettysburg. There are several people who died after the battle. Most of them died from diseases caused by the smell and the, poisoning and things like that. But she's the only one to die directly, and she was quite a hero. One good thing that did happen with the Jennie Wade story, as tragic as it was the fact that Jack Skelly's body was brought back to Gettysburg. He is buried only several feet away from Jennie Wade's grave, and that makes me very happy. Now, whether that was planned, I don't think so, or whether there was an opening for a body, I don't know, but it worked out, and I hope these two people are happy together in the great hereafter. As for Wesley Culp, his body was never found. It is believed he was killed on Culp's Hill, not far from his uncle's farm. The only thing that they did find was the rifle butt belonging to Wesley. It had his name carved in it. Some people say that the family found his body and buried it in a secret place, so the body could not be desecrated. People in town felt that Wesley was a traitor to the Union because he was in the Confederate Army. We'll never know for sure what really happened to Wesley's body, but I hope he's resting in peace along with Jack and Jennie. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you enjoyed it. There is much more to the Jennie Wade story, and that's the paranormal side of it. Some of the things that go on in that house are incredible, and I hope you'll join me on the next Freaky Friday to hear about this story. Thanks for listening. Please tell your friends about it and click subscribe. See you next time. Bye-bye.